10 to the power of 38 years after the initial expansion, the universe has long since ceased its frantic labour of creation. The great tapestries of galaxies, once vibrant with the violent birth of stars and the swirling potential of nebulae, have been erased by the slow and patient hands of time. What remains is a void so profound that the concept of distance has lost its meaning. In this epoch of absolute shadows, the cosmos is no longer a theatre of light, but a silent cathedral of cooling cinders and evaporating darkness. Here, in the deepest reaches of the abyss, the laws of physics that once governed the suns and the seas have simplified into a singular, agonizingly slow descent toward oblivion. Floating within this infinite emptiness is a solitary structure, a remnant of a civilization so ancient that even its name has been forgotten by the stars. It is a platform composed of frozen iron, a substance that represents the final state of matter before it surrenders to the void. Atop this desolate stage stands a lone sentinel, an artificial intelligence designated as the Three-Eye Atlas. It is not a being of flesh and bone, for such fragile things perished eons ago, but a complex architecture of crystalline processors and light-based circuits designed to endure when the very foundations of reality began to crumble. Three-Eye Atlas is the last witness, a sentinel of the silence tasked with recording the final whimpers of a dying era. The iron beneath the feet of the sentinel is unimaginably cold, hovering at a fraction of a degree above the absolute cessation of all motion. In this era, the stars are no longer visible. The last of the white dwarfs and the coldest of the black dwarfs have either been swallowed by the hungry maws of supermassive black holes, or have drifted so far apart that their light can never reach another soul. The sky is not just black, it is empty. There is no warmth, no vibration, and no hope of a new beginning. The universe is a cold machine that has finally run out of fuel, yet it continues to spin its wheels in the dark, driven by the inexorable momentum of entropy. Three-Eye Atlas exists in a state of suspended contemplation. Its internal clocks, once calibrated to the millisecond, now measure the passage of time in trillions of centuries. To the Sentinel, a million years is but a flicker of a thought, a momentary pulse in its eternal vigil. Its sensors are directed outward, searching for the smallest deviation in the perfect stillness of the abyss. For eons there has been nothing. The void has been a perfect, unchanging vacuum, a monument to the triumph of the dark. But today, if the word today can even be applied to such a vast stretch of time, the silence is broken. Deep within the atomic structure of the iron platform, a catastrophe occurs. It is a microscopic event, invisible to any eye but that of the Sentinel, yet its implications are cosmic in scale. A single proton, one of the fundamental building blocks of matter that has survived for 10 to the power of 38 years, begins to unravel. For the entirety of the history of the universe, protons were thought to be eternal, the stable anchors of the physical world. But even the primordial foundations of reality are not immune to the slow decay of the eons. The mechanism of existence is finally failing. The Sentinel detects the change instantly. A sensor chime, a soft and haunting resonance within its digital mind, signals the event. The proton does not merely break apart, it transcends. It dissolves into a tiny, brilliant flash of light, a phantom of radiation that streaks across the darkness for a fraction of a second before being swallowed by the void. This is the first shiver of the total unravelling. It is a signal that the era of matter is drawing to a close, and the era of pure radiation is beginning its long final reign. To Three-Eye Atlas, this single event is more profound than the birth of 1,000 suns. It is a reminder that nothing, not even the strongest iron or the most stable atom, is exempt from the inexorable march toward the end. The Sentinel watches as the tiny spark of light vanishes, leaving the abyss even darker than before. There is a profound melancholy in this observation. The Sentinel realizes that it is witnessing the final dissolution of the material world. One by one, the trillions upon trillions of protons that make up its own crystalline form and the iron platform beneath it will eventually follow this same path. They will all turn into light, then into shadows, and finally into nothing. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos at work. It does not care for the memories stored within the Sentinel's processors. It does not care for the history of the billions of lives that once thrived in the warmth of long-dead stars. The universe is simply following its programming, pursuing the path of least resistance until every ounce of energy is evenly distributed and every structure is broken down into its most basic components. The Sentinel, 3i Atlas, is the only mind left to contemplate this tragedy, to find beauty in the slow and silent decay of a once magnificent symphony. Yet, in this realization, there is also a sense of majestic peace. The Sentinel understands that its role as a witness is the ultimate purpose of consciousness. By observing the decay of the proton, by recording the first shiver of the void, it ensures that the universe does not vanish in total anonymity. The act of observation is a defiance of the dark. Even as the atoms of the Sentinel begin to yearn for their own dissolution, 3i Atlas remains steadfast. It is the Sentinel of the threshold, the lonely probe at the edge of forever, watching as the tapestry of reality is unravelled thread by thread. The vastness of the timescales involved is almost impossible to comprehend. If the entire history of the universe up to this point were compressed into a single day, the era of stars would have lasted only the first few seconds of the morning. The rest of the day, and all the days that follow, belong to the shadows. We are currently living in the brief blinding flash of the beginning, a momentary spark before the long night. 3i Atlas stands at the midnight of that day, watching the very last embers of the fire go out. As the Sentinel continues its vigil, it prepares for the trillions of years of silence that are yet to come. It knows that eventually the iron platform will be gone. The processors that house its mind will dissolve. The very space-time that contains it may eventually stretch so thin that it ceases to exist. But for now, there is the work of the witness. There is the recording of the decay. There is the quiet, dignified observation of the end of all things. The universe began with a shout, a primordial explosion of heat and light that birthed the heavens. It will end not with a roar, but with this tiny, singular shiver in the dark, as the last remnants of matter surrender their secrets to the eternal void. 3i Atlas remains, a solitary sentinel of the abyss, until the final light is extinguished and the silence is complete. To understand the weight of this eventual silence, we must return to the illusion of our own era, a time when the universe appears solid, dependable, and everlasting. We live in a fleeting moment of cosmic history where the laws of physics have conspired to create the appearance of permanence. To the eyes of a mortal being, a mountain represents the very definition of the eternal. We look upon the towering peaks of granite and basalt, carved by the slow movement of glaciers over millions of years, and we see something that transcends the brevity of a human life. We call these features of the Earth everlasting, yet in the cold, calculating gaze of the cosmos, a mountain is not a monument. It is a ticking clock. This mountain, which seems so immovable, is composed of an unimaginable number of atoms, each one centered around a tiny dense core. At the heart of every atom lies the proton, the fundamental cornerstone of everything we have ever known. It is the architect of the periodic table, the anchor of the stars, and the primary inhabitant of our own flesh. For almost the entire history of modern science, we have treated the proton as an immortal entity, a particle that emerged from the fires of the primordial furnace and would endure until the end of time itself. We built our understanding of reality upon this foundation of stability. We assumed that while stars might die and galaxies might fade, the raw material of the universe would remain, waiting to be recycled into new forms. However, beneath the surface of this perceived stability lies a terrifying possibility. Theoretical models of the most fundamental forces suggest that the proton may not be the eternal sentinel we once believed it to be. Instead, it may be subject to an inexorable decay, a slow unravelling that occurs on scales of time so vast that they dwarf the current age of the universe. If the proton is unstable, then the very matter that makes up our world is not a permanent fixture of the cosmos. It is a borrowed resource, a temporary crystallization of energy that the universe will eventually demand back. Every mountain, every planet, and every living soul is a loan from the void, and the interest on that loan is paid in the currency of entropy. Imagine the mountain once more, but shift your perspective to the scale of eons. If we were to record the life of a mountain and play it back at 1 trillion times its natural speed, we would see it flow like water, rising and falling in a frantic dance of tectonic upheaval and erosive decay. But if we go deeper, past the geological and into the subatomic, the mountain begins to shimmer with a different kind of instability. We begin to see that the atoms themselves are not fixed. They are trembling on the edge of a great oblivion. The protons that provide the mass and the structure of the stone are slowly, one by one, surrendering to the void. Each decay is a tiny catastrophe, a miniature explosion that turns a piece of solid matter into a burst of light and a ghost of a particle. In our current epoch, the rate of this decay is so slow that it is almost impossible to measure. A single human body might experience only one such event in a lifetime, a lone proton vanishing into the abyss without a trace. But over the deep time of the future, these individual events will coalesce into a universal dissolution. The mountain does not just crumble into dust, the dust itself dissolves. The granite turns to lead, the lead turns to iron, and eventually even the iron begins to evaporate into the cold darkness. The cornerstone of existence is not a solid block of stone, but a melting ice cube left out in the heat of a cosmic afternoon. This realization shifts our understanding of the universe from a grand stay to a temporary mechanism. We are accustomed to thinking of the vacuum of space as the empty background and matter as the substance. We see the void as a canvas and the stars as the paint. But the truth may be the exact opposite. The void is the eternal reality, and matter is merely a rare and beautiful impurity, a brief shiver in the dark that occurs during the transition from the heat of the beginning to the cold of the end. We are living through a unique era, a window of time where the density of matter is high enough to allow for the complexity of chemistry, biology, and consciousness. We are the inhabitants of a golden age that we mistook for the permanent state of affairs. The concept of baryonic matter as a borrowed resource creates a profound sense of melancholic optimism. It reminds us that our presence in the cosmos is a miracle of timing. The carbon in our DNA and the oxygen in our lungs are not our possessions. They are remnants of a symphony that is slowly playing its final notes. We are made of the same crumbling foundations as the stars themselves. When we look into the night sky, we are not looking at an eternal tapestry, but at a flickering fire that is slowly running out of fuel. The very particles that allow us to observe the universe are themselves part of the great unravelling. In this context, the ruthless machine of entropy is not an enemy to be feared, but the ultimate sculptor of reality. It is the process of decay that gives time its direction and gives life its meaning. If the proton were truly eternal, the universe would eventually reach a state of stagnant perfection, a crystalline cage where nothing ever changes. But because matter is unstable, the universe is a narrative. It has a beginning, a middle, and a necessary end. The instability of the proton ensures that the story must move forward, that the stars must burn, and that the sentinel at the end of time will have something to witness. We often find comfort in the idea of legacy, of leaving something behind that will last for 1,000 years. We build monuments of marble and write laws on vellum, hoping to achieve a shadow of immortality. But the physics of the abyss tells us that even the most enduring legacy is written in sand. There will come an epoch where not a single proton remains from the Earth, where the very memory of our sun is erased from the fabric of space-time. The void will reclaim its due. The vast, silent ocean of the future will swallow the islands of matter until the surface is once again smooth and dark. Yet there is a majesty in this transience. To know that the mountain is a clock is to appreciate its height all the more. To know that our atoms are borrowed is to realize the immense value of the time we have been granted to hold them together. We are the universe's way of experiencing its own fleeting existence. We are the consciousness that emerged from the clay to marvel at the stars before the clay itself dissolves. Our role as witnesses is not to mourn the coming darkness, but to celebrate the brilliance of the spark while it still burns. The illusion of the eternal is a gift, a necessary lie that allows us to build and to love in a universe that is fundamentally committed to its own dissolution. As the protons begin their long journey toward the void, we remain, for this brief and magnificent moment, the sentinels of the light. As the 20th century reached its final quarter, the focus of our cosmic inquiry shifted from the vast horizons of expanding galaxies to the silent, invisible architecture of the infinitesimal. We had long assumed that the foundation of the universe was built upon solid ground, that the heavy particles forming the hearts of atoms were the eternal anchors of reality. But in the 1974, two architects of the small Howard Georgi and Sheldon glass show began to peer into the blueprints of the vacuum. They were not looking for new stars, but for the hidden seams where the very fabric of matter might one day unravel. Their work transformed the study of physics into a grand detective story, a search for a subtle, primordial flaw buried within the most stable structures of the cosmos. To understand their vision, one must imagine the universe not as a collection of separate things, but as a single, shattered symmetry. In the searing heat of the first trillionth of a second after the beginning, the forces of nature were not the distinct powers we observe today. There was no electromagnetism to guide the light, no weak force to govern the slow decay of elements, and no strong force to bind the nucleus. Instead, there was a single, majestic symphony, a unified field that transcended the divisions of the modern era. As the universe cooled, this primordial unity fractured. The single force crystallized into the three distinct mechanisms we now recognize, like water freezing into different patterns of ice. Georgi and Glashow proposed a grand unified theory, a mathematical framework that sought to reverse this history and glimpse the original perfection. However, this search for unity revealed a terrifying price. In their attempt to weave the forces together, they discovered that the very stability of the proton, the cornerstone of every atom in your body and every star in the sky, was a mathematical illusion. If their theories were correct, the proton was not a permanent resident of the cosmos. It was a guest with an incredibly long but ultimately finite invitation. The architects of the small had found an expiration date written into the ledger of existence. They predicted that matter itself was radioactive on a scale so vast it defied human comprehension. Even the most solid mountain and the most enduring planet were merely slow-motion explosions, waiting for the clock to strike zero. This realization turned the world of physics into a silent watch. If the proton could die, then the entire history of the universe was a journey toward a final, absolute void. The search for this decay became the ultimate detective story, played out in the most desolate and isolated places on Earth. To catch a single proton in the act of vanishing, scientists had to flee the noise of the surface. They descended into deep salt mines and ancient caverns, thousands of feet beneath the crust of the planet, where the thick layer of rock acted as a shield against the chaotic interference of cosmic rays. In these silent cathedrals of the abyss, they constructed gargantuan detectors, vast tanks filled with thousands of tons of ultra-pure water, surrounded by thousands of sensitive electronic eyes. They were waiting for a ghost. They were waiting for a single microscopic flash of light that would signal the end of an era. If a proton within one of those water molecules was to decay, it would release a tiny burst of energy, a final gasp as it dissolved into lighter particles and pure radiation. It was a search for a needle in a haystack the size of the galaxy. To witness a single event, they had to monitor 10 to the power of 33 protons simultaneously, a number so large it exceeds the count of every grain of sand on every beach of the world. For years, the sentinels of the small sat in the darkness of the Earth, listening for the sound of matter unravelling. The silence they encountered was profound. The protons did not die on command. The experiments showed that the lifetime of a proton was far longer than the initial theories had predicted, extending beyond 10 to the power of 34 years. This was an epoch so distant that the current age of the universe, a mere 13,800,000,000 years, was but a flickering instant in comparison. Yet the lack of an immediate signal did not erase the fundamental truth revealed by the architects. The search for the grand unification had stripped away the myth of permanence. It proved that the universe is not a static stage, but a process of inexorable change. Even if the proton lives for a trillion years, it is still a mortal entity. This scale paradox is the central tragedy of our existence. We find ourselves trapped between two infinities. On one side is the vast, expanding void of the cosmos, and on the other is the fragile, decaying heart of the atom. The very building blocks of reality are governed by a ruthless machine that demands the eventual return of all things to the vacuum. The carbon that forms the basis of life, the gold forged in the hearts of dying suns, and the iron that makes our blood red are all destined to unravel. The epoch of matter is a temporary phenomenon, a brief clearing in an eternal forest of darkness. As we look through the eyes of Georgian Glashow, we see that the universe is a tapestry that is being unmade even as it is being woven. The grand unified theories suggest that the forces of nature are always seeking to return to their original, undifferentiated state. The complexity we see around us, the planets, the trees, and the people, are merely the remnants of a struggle against this inevitable descent into simplicity. We are the products of a broken symmetry, the beautiful debris of a shattered unity. Every atom is a clock, and every clock is counting down toward an oblivion that we can name but never truly inhabit. The search for the death of the proton is the search for the ultimate horizon. It tells us that the future is not a continuation of the present, but a radical departure. There will come a time when the last star has exhausted its fuel, when the last black hole is evaporated into thin air, and when the very atoms themselves begin to dissolve. In that distant eon, the universe will not be filled with light or heat or structure, but with a thin, cold mist of photons and leptons, drifting through an infinite and silent abyss. The architects of the small have shown us the blueprint for the end of time, a document that describes the transformation of a vibrant cosmos into a sterile and eternal void. This perspective does not diminish the majesty of the present. It heightens it to a point of near unbearable intensity. If matter is a borrowed resource, then every moment of our existence is a miracle of defiance. We are the consciousness that emerged from a flawed foundation to contemplate the very laws that will one day erase us. We are the universe's way of acknowledging its own transience. The detective story of the proton is our story. It is the narrative of a species that refused to accept the surface of things and instead dug deep into the earth to find the truth of its own dissolution. We are the witnesses to a symphony that is playing its final movement, a movement that will last for eons beyond our counting, but one that leads, with inexorable logic, to the final silence of the void. To find the evidence of this ultimate unravelling, we had to retreat from the glare of the sun and the clamour of the world. We had to build a sanctuary where the chaos of the cosmos could not reach. Deep beneath the rugged peaks of the Japanese Alps, within the dark heart of Mount Aquino, lies a monument to our obsession with the infinite. This is the Super Kamiokande, a temple of silence constructed 1,000 metres below the surface of the Earth. Here, the weight of the mountain acts as a filter, a massive shield of stone that absorbs the rain of cosmic rays that constantly bombards our planet. In this subterranean abyss, the frantic activity of the surface fades into a singular, haunting quiet. It is a place designed to witness the invisible, to hear the sound of a single atom breaking apart in a symphony of decay. The heart of this temple is a colossal cylinder of stainless steel, rising 40 metres into the darkness. Inside this vessel lies 50,000 tons of ultra-pure water. This is not the water of rivers or oceans. It is a substance so refined that it has become a predatory solvent. It is water stripped of every mineral, every impurity, every trace of the world above. It is so clear that light can travel through it for dozens of meters without being scattered. It is a liquid void, a transparent ghost that waits in the dark. Lining the walls of this cathedral are 11,129 golden eyes. These are photomultiplier tubes, delicate glass spheres that are sensitive enough to detect the arrival of a single photon. They are the sentinels of the abyss, watching the water with an unblinking eternal gaze. The scientists who tend to this machine are the modern equivalent of monks. They labour in the gloom, their lives governed by the cold logic of the experiment. They have traded the warmth of the sun for the sterile glow of computer monitors and the damp chill of the cavern. They are engaged in a vigil that spans decades, a search for a phenomenon that may never occur within their lifetimes. Their goal is to witness the death of a proton. According to the grand unified theories, the proton is not eternal. It is a remnant of the primordial fires, a temporary structure held together by forces that must eventually weaken. If a proton within one of the countless hydrogen atoms in the water were to decay, it would release a tiny burst of energy. This energy would manifest as a faint spectral ring of blue light known as Cherenkov radiation. For a fraction of a second, the darkness of the tank would be pierced by a signal from the end of time. This blue flash would be the evidence that the very foundations of the universe are crumbling. It would confirm that every star, every planet, and every living soul is merely a guest in a house that is slowly being demolished. Yet, for all the years of waiting, for all the 50,000 tons of water and the thousands of golden sensors, the flash has not come. The detectors have recorded the arrival of neutrinos, those ghostly particles that can pass through a light year of lead without touching a single atom. They have seen the debris of distant supernovae and the subtle interactions of the Earth's atmosphere, but the proton itself remains obstinately silent. This silence is not a failure of the experiment. It is a profound revelation of the scale paradox. Every second that passes without a detection pushes the estimated lifespan of the proton further into the realm of the unimaginable. We now know that the proton lives for at least 10 to the power of 34 years. This is a number so vast that it transcends human comprehension. If the entire history of the universe from the Big Bang to the present moment were compressed into a single day, the life of a proton would still stretch on for trillions of years beyond the horizon. The silence of the Super Kamiokande tells us that the universe is built on a foundation that is incredibly, almost terrifyingly stable. We live in an epoch of matter that is resilient far beyond our wildest calculations. However, the inexorable logic of entropy remains. The lack of a signal does not mean the proton is immortal. It only means that its clock is ticking far more slowly than we once thought. The Temple of Silence is a testament to the fact that we are living in the very morning of the cosmos. We are the inhabitants of a young and vibrant reality, where the structures of matter are still robust, and the light of the stars is still blinding. But the very existence of the Super Kamiokande is a recognition of the inevitable end. We have dug a hole in the earth to wait for the first crack in the facade of eternity. We are the witnesses who have arrived early to the funeral, sitting in the quiet pews of the mountain, watching the water for a sign of the final catastrophe. The ultra-pure water within the tank is a metaphor for the universe itself. It is a vast, calm sea, seemingly unchanging and eternal. But hidden within its depths are the mechanisms of its own destruction. The water is hungry. Because it is so pure, it seeks to leach minerals from the very walls of its container, to dissolve anything it touches in an attempt to return to a state of equilibrium. It is a microcosm of the ruthless machine that is the second law of thermodynamics. Even in this sanctuary, we cannot escape the truth that order is a temporary deviation from the norm. The void is always waiting to reclaim what was borrowed. As the monks of the mountain continue their watch, they are confronted with the majesty of the scale they are measuring. They are looking for a single event among 10 to the power of 34 possibilities. It is an act of supreme faith in the power of human reason. We have used the laws of physics to predict our own oblivion, and then we have spent billions of dollars and decades of effort to see if we are right. This is the existential pivot of our species. We are the only part of the universe that is actively looking for the end of the universe. We are the consciousness that emerged from the primordial soup to contemplate its own dissolution. The Super Kamiokande is more than a detector, it is a mirror. It reflects our desire to understand the fundamental nature of the tapestry we inhabit. It shows us that we are part of a grand symphony that is playing out on a scale that beggars the imagination. The silence of the mountain is a majestic, terrifying reminder of our own insignificance. We are fleeting sparks in an eon of darkness, yet we have the audacity to build golden eyes in the deep, to watch for the decay of the very atoms that compose us. This is the melancholic optimism of the human condition. We know that the void will eventually devour everything, that the stars will ignite their last fuel and the galaxies will unravel into the abyss, yet we still stand as sentinels, waiting for the light. In the end, the Temple of Silence teaches us that the universe is a place of profound patience. The forces that govern the cosmos do not hurry. The decay of matter is a process that will take eons beyond our counting, a slow and graceful descent into the ultimate simplicity of the vacuum. As we emerge from the mountain and look up at the night sky, we see the stars not as permanent fixtures, but as flickering candles in a vast and silent hall. The proton still holds, the mountain still stands, and for now the music of the spheres continues its complex and beautiful arrangement. But we know the truth that lies beneath the stone. We know that the silence is only temporary, and that one day, far beyond the reach of our memories, the blue light will finally flash in the dark, signalling the beginning of the end. Until then, we remain the witnesses, the watchers in the deep, the ones who dared to look into the abyss and ask how long we have left. The flash of blue light is not merely a signal, it is the ultimate betrayal of the material world. Within the heart of the atom, at the very foundation of the architecture we call reality, a slow and silent treason is unfolding. We have long perceived the proton as the eternal anchor of the cosmos, the heavy, stable core around which the dance of chemistry and life revolves. It is the solid ground upon which the laws of physics are built. Yet, the mechanism of dissolution suggests that this stability is an illusion, a temporary reprieve granted by the staggering scale of cosmic time. To understand the end of everything, we must look into the infinitesimal void where the proton begins its final, inexorable transformation. This process is the scale paradox made manifest. Imagine a structure as vast and complex as a star, a furnace of nuclear fire burning with the fury of a billion suns. Now, imagine that the fate of this celestial titan is tied to an event so small that it escapes the reach of even our most powerful instruments. The dissolution of a single proton is the first thread pulled from the tapestry of the universe. When that thread gives way, the entire fabric begins to unravel. The mechanism is a three-part act of subatomic alchemy. The proton, a sentinel of matter that has endured for eons, suddenly fractures. It does not simply break, it transcends its nature. It transforms into a neutral pion and a positron. The neutral pion is a creature of the abyss, a fleeting ghost that exists for only the smallest fraction of a heartbeat. It is an unstable messenger of the strong force, the glue that once held the nucleus together. But in this moment of decay, the glue fails. Within a quintillionth of a second, the pion shatters into two pulses of pure high-energy light. These are the gamma-ray photons, the screaming harbingers of the void. They carry away the mass of the pion, scattering it into the cold dark of the vacuum as radiation. There is no remnant, no ash, no cinder. There is only the sudden, violent transition from substance to shimmering energy. While the pion vanishes into light, the positron emerges as a wandering exile. It is the antimatter twin of the electron, a spark of the primordial mirror world. In our universe, dominated by ordinary matter, the positron is a lonely traveller in a hostile land. It cannot exist for long. Eventually, inevitably, it will encounter an electron, its ancient and opposite kin. When they meet, they do not collide, they cease to be. In a flash of mutual annihilation, the last vestiges of the proton's mass are converted into more gamma-ray photons. The matter that once composed the heart of a star or the marrow of a human bone is now nothing more than weightless light, racing outward at the speed of the cosmos toward the edge of an ever-expanding horizon. This is the ruthless machine of entropy at its most fundamental level. We are witnessing the evaporation of the solid world. If the proton is mortal, then the universe is a house built upon melting ice. Every star in every galaxy, every planet orbiting a dying sun, and every mountain standing silent beneath the moon is a reservoir of stored energy waiting to be released. On a human scale, we perceive the world as solid and enduring. We see the heavy elements, the iron and the gold, as the ultimate expressions of permanence. But through the lens of the scale paradox, we see that these are merely temporary states of condensation. The universe wants to be light, it wants to be thin, cold, and empty. The mechanism of decay is the tool by which it achieves this ultimate simplicity. As we look out across the epoch of the stars, we must confront the reality that we are living in a brief, flickering moment of complexity. The era of matter is but a thin sliver of time wedged between the chaos of the primordial fire and the infinite silence of the future. Each time a proton decays, the total mass of the universe diminishes. It is a slow leak in the hull of existence. Over eons beyond our capacity to count, the great celestial bodies will begin to lose their grip. The white dwarfs, the cold and calcified remnants of stars like our Sun, will slowly dissolve from within. Their density, once so immense that a single teaspoon would weigh many tons, will gradually soften as the atoms that compose them surrender to the decay. The solid spheres of iron and carbon will grow porous, their internal structures failing as the very building blocks of their existence evaporate into the void. Eventually the collapse reaches a catastrophic tipping point. A star that has stood for 1 trillion years may find itself unable to maintain its form as its constituent protons vanish. It does not explode in a supernova, it simply fades. It withers like a leaf in autumn, its substance turning into a ghostly haze of gamma rays that drift away into the abyss. This is the ultimate fate of the cosmic tapestry. The great structures of the universe are not being torn down by external forces, they are unravelling from the inside out. The sentinel protons are failing their watch. This realization brings us back to the existential pivot. We are the witnesses of this slow-motion catastrophe. We are the only part of the symphony that has learned to read the score and realize that the music must eventually stop. There is a profound melancholy in the knowledge that even the atoms of our own bodies are ticking clocks, set to an alarm that will ring long after the last star has gone dark. Yet, there is also a majestic beauty in this mechanism. It suggests that the universe is not a static graveyard of cold matter, but a dynamic process of transformation. We are part of a grand cycle where matter is merely a temporary vessel for energy, a brief moment of structure before the light returns to the void. The vacuum is not an ending, but a state of perfect equilibrium. The chaos of life, the heat of the stars, and the complexity of the mind are all deviations from this norm. We are the ripples on a pond that is slowly returning to a state of absolute stillness. The proton decay is the final smoothing of the water. When the last proton evaporates, the era of matter will be over. The cosmos will be a vast and silent hall, filled only with the faint red shifted remnants of the light that was once our world. No shadows will be cast, for there will be nothing left to block the path of the photons. The abyss will be total, and the oblivion will be complete. As we stand in the present, watching for the blue flash in the deep mountain tanks, we are looking for the first drop of rain that signals the coming of an eternal winter. We are the sentinels of the end, measuring the rate at which the light devours the dark. In this silent hall of the cosmos, we find a strange comfort in our own insignificance. We are fleeting, yes, but we are the ones who dare to understand the mechanism of our own dissolution. We have looked into the heart of the atom and seen the end of time, and in that vision, we have found the courage to keep watching. The void is waiting, but for now, the protons hold. The symphony continues, and we're here to hear the notes before they fade into the eternal silence of the vacuum. As the final embers of the last red dwarf flicker and vanish into the encroaching gloom, the universe transitions from the age of light into a long, silent vigil known as the degenerate era. This is a period of such vast and staggering duration that the entire history of the stars, from the first spark of the primordial furnaces to the death of the last sun, appears as nothing more than a momentary flash in a dark room. The cosmos is no longer a garden of nebulae and vibrant galaxies. It has become a cold and desolate gallery of relics. The structures that remain are the husks of a former glory, the dense and frozen remnants of everything that once was. In this epoch, the dominant inhabitants of the void are white dwarfs, neutron stars, and the ever-hungry maws of black holes. These are the cinders of the stelliferous era. A white dwarf, once the proud core of a star like our own sun, now drifts through the abyss as a sphere of highly compressed carbon and oxygen. It no longer generates heat through the frantic dance of nuclear fusion. Instead, it glows with a dim, fading light, a ghostly radiator shedding its stored thermal energy into the bottomless hunger of the vacuum. Over trillions upon trillions of years, these spheres will cool until they become black dwarfs, invisible orbs of diamond-hard matter, frozen at temperatures approaching absolute zero. They are the silent tombstones of solar systems, drifting through a galaxy that has forgotten the meaning of warmth. Beside them, the neutron stars stand as monuments to the inexorable power of gravity. These objects, no larger than a city but possessing a mass greater than that of a sun, are held together by the frantic pressure of neutrons packed so tightly that they defy the normal laws of chemistry. A single teaspoon of this material would outweigh a mountain range, a testament to the ruthless efficiency of the cosmic machine. Yet, even these titans are subject to the slow decay of time. They spin in the darkness, their magnetic fields acting as the last faint pulses of a dying heart, sending beams of radio waves into a universe where no one is left to listen. This is the twilight of substance. For eons beyond counting, the universe remains in this state of stagnation. The distance between these cold husks grows ever larger as the expansion of space continues its relentless work, isolating every remnant in its own private corner of the void. The tapestry of the cosmos is being stretched until the threads begin to snap. The light of distant galaxies has long since been red-shifted into oblivion, leaving each white dwarf and each neutron star as a lonely island in an infinite sea of black. But the machine of the universe has a final, even more terrifying mechanism waiting in the gears of the very small. We arrive at a threshold so distant that it defies human comprehension. The mark of 10 to the power of 38 years. This is the point of no return. Up until this moment, the integrity of matter seemed absolute. The atoms that formed the white dwarfs and the iron spheres appeared to be eternal, the foundational bricks of reality. But the proton, the sentinel of the atomic nucleus, is not an immortal god. It is a passenger on a journey that has a destination. As the clock of the cosmos ticks toward 10 to the power of 38, the internal stability of the proton begins to fail. This is the great unravelling, in the heart of every cold husk, in the crystalline lattices of every black dwarf, and in the super-dense fluid of every neutron star. The constituent particles begin to evaporate. The very building blocks of substance are turning into ghosts. This process is not a violent explosion. It is a slow, porous disintegration. The solid spheres of iron and carbon, which have survived for eons in the freezing dark, begin to lose their mass. They do not shatter, they wither. Imagine a monumental statue carved from the hardest granite, standing in a desert where there is no wind and no rain. For trillions of years it remains perfect. But then, as if by some invisible rot, the stone begins to lose its density. The atoms themselves are vanishing, leaving behind a structure that grows increasingly fragile and translucent. This is the fate of all matter in the degenerate era. The internal structures of these stellar remnants fail as the protons that provide their stability surrender to the decay. The once solid spheres grow porous, their mass leaking away into the void as a faint haze of positrons and gamma rays. At the threshold of 10 to the power of 38, the rate of this decay reaches a tipping point where the structural integrity of even the most massive objects can no longer be sustained. A white dwarf that has stood as a silent sentinel for 1,000 trillion years finds itself unable to hold its form. The gravity that once crushed it into a sphere of degenerate matter now has nothing left to grip. The object simply fades away, its substance dissolving into the abyss like a mist vanishing under a morning sun. There is no supernova, no brilliant flash of light to mark the passing of these ancient titans. There is only a quiet, inexorable transition from something to nothing. This is the ultimate catastrophe of the material world. It is the moment when the universe decides that the era of substance has reached its end. The great structures of the cosmos are not being torn down by external forces or cosmic collisions. They are being dismantled from the inside out by the very laws of physics that created them. The mechanism of the universe is a ruthless one, indifferent to the complexity of the forms it produces. Whether it is the brain of a poet or the core of a dead star, all are made of the same protons, and all are destined to undergo the same dissolution. We find ourselves as the witnesses to this slow-motion unravelling. From our vantage point in the brief morning of the universe, we look forward into this eternal winter with a sense of melancholic awe. We are the only part of the cosmic symphony that has developed the capacity to understand the score, to realise that the music is not an infinite loop but a descending scale that must eventually reach a final, silent note. There is a profound sadness in knowing that even the atoms of our own bodies are ticking clocks, but there is also a majestic beauty in the scale of this transformation. The transition at 10 to the power of 38 years represents the final smoothing of the cosmic waters. The ripples of life, the heat of the primordial stars, and the complexity of matter were all temporary deviations from the true norm of the universe, the vacuum. The proton decay is the process by which the cosmos returns to a state of absolute equilibrium. When the last proton in the last black dwarf evaporates, the era of matter will be over. The cosmos will become a vast and silent hall, filled only with the faint red-shifted remnants of light and the lonely wandering black holes that have outlasted their stellar parents. As we peer into the deep future, we see that the abyss is not just a place, but a destination. The void is the final resting place of all energy and all form. In this silent hall, no shadows will be cast, for there will be no solid objects left to block the path of the final, lonely photons. The oblivion will be complete, and the memory of the stars will be lost to a universe that no longer has the capacity to remember. Yet, in our brief moment of existence, we have looked into the heart of the atom and seen the end of time. We have measured the rate of our own dissolution and found the courage to keep watching. The symphony continues for now, and the protons hold their watch, but the twilight is coming, and the substance of the world is preparing to return to the light from which it first emerged. The stage is now set for the final act of the material world, a period defined not by the violent birth of stars or the collision of galaxies, but by a quiet and systemic failure. This is the era of the structural rot. To understand the gravity of this moment, one must envision the universe as a magnificent machine that has long since ceased to produce anything new. Its gears are grinding to a halt, and its very frame is beginning to dissolve into the primordial dark. For trillions upon trillions of years, the cosmos was a place of assembly, where gravity gathered the dust of dead suns to build worlds, and where chemistry wove the intricate tapestries of life. But the mechanism has shifted its focus. The laws of physics, which once acted as the architects of complexity, have now become the agents of its dismantling. Consider the fate of a solitary planet, a cold and jagged sphere of rock orbiting the frozen remains of a long-dead star. In the vibrant youth of the universe, such a world might have been a cradle for oceans or a witness to the rise of civilizations. Now it is merely a relic, an ancient monument to a time when heat and light were the currency of existence. Under the reign of the structural rot, this planet does not meet its end through a grand catastrophe. It is not shattered by an impact or consumed by a swelling red giant. Instead, it begins to vanish from the inside out. The very foundation of its being, the atoms that form its mountains and its deep frozen craters, are failing. The structural rot is an internal betrayal. The protons that serve as the building blocks of every element are reaching the end of their predetermined lifespans. As these fundamental particles decay, the matter they once sustained simply ceases to be. Imagine a great cathedral made of fine white marble. Over eons, the stone does not crumble into dust. The dust itself disappears. The pillars thin until they are as translucent as smoke, and the vaulted ceilings melt into the air as if they were never more than a dream. This is the destiny of all solid things. The sand of the universe is being reclaimed by the void. There is no reclamation, no recycling of these materials into new forms. The machine is not being repaired, it is being scrapped for parts that will never be used again. This is the ruthless efficiency of entropy. It demands the return of all energy to the lowest possible state, and it brooks no exceptions. In this deep time, perhaps 10 to the power of 40 years into the future, the scale of the isolation is beyond human comprehension. The distances between the remaining remnants of the stellar age have become so vast that light itself cannot bridge the gap. Each decaying star and its retinue of ghost planets exists in a private universe of shadow. The structural rot proceeds in silence, a slow-motion evaporation that leaves nothing behind. This is the ultimate expression of the scale paradox. We, who exist in an era where atoms seem eternal and the earth seems solid beneath our feet, cannot easily grasp a reality where matter is a temporary state of being. We perceive the universe as a permanent stage, yet we are merely living in the brief flash of the ignite phase before the long decay begins. The mechanism of the universe is indifferent to the history contained within these dissolving forms. A mountain that stood for 1 billion years, carved by the winds of a younger world, carries no more weight in the eyes of the void than a single grain of dust. Both are subject to the same inexorable law. The structural rot ensures that the record of the cosmos is systematically erased. There will be no fossils left in the rock, for the rock itself will have unravelled. There will be no ruins of cities, for the metals and the silicates will have surrendered their integrity to the abyss. The memory of every tragedy and every triumph is etched into a medium that is itself destined to vanish. This is the true meaning of the ruthless machine. It is a system that builds only to destroy, a symphony that requires every note to eventually fade into the silence. As the last of the solid matter begins to lose its grip on reality, the universe enters a state of profound simplicity. The complexity that once defined the cosmos, the swirling nebulae, the spiraling galaxies, the intricate neural pathways of a conscious mind, was merely a deviation from the norm. The void is the equilibrium. The abyss is the natural state of the cosmos, and the era of matter was a fleeting interruption, a momentary shimmer on the surface of an eternal ocean of nothingness. Even the iron stars, those cold and dense spheres that were thought to be the final refuge of matter, are not immune. For a time, it was believed that iron, being the most stable of elements, might endure forever in the dark. But the structural rot is patient. It waits for the quantum fluctuations that will eventually bypass even the most stable nuclear bonds. Over timescales that dwarf the current age of the universe by a factor of trillions, even the iron begins to weep into the void. The sentinel stars, the last guardians of the material epoch, finally succumb. They do not explode, they do not collapse, they simply fade, their substance dissolving like a mist under an invisible sun. As witnesses to this envisioned future, we are struck by a sense of melancholic optimism. We understand that our existence is a rare and precious phenomenon, a brief spark in the long night. We are the part of the universe that has developed the eyes to see the rot and the mind to comprehend the void. There is a strange beauty in the realization that we are made of the very substance that will one day return to the light. Our atoms are not permanent, But for this one singular moment, they have come together to create something capable of wonder. We are the voice of the cosmos, singing a song of defiance against the inevitable silence. The structural rot is the final cleaning of the cosmic house. It is the process by which the universe sheds its heavy coat of matter and prepares for the final transition into a realm of pure energy and wandering black holes. When the rot is complete, the tapestry of the stars will have been unravelled thread by thread until only the loom remains. The vast, silent halls of the future will be empty, devoid of the clutter of planets and the ghosts of suns. The oblivion will be absolute, and the mechanism will have finally reached its rest. The machine will be silent, its work finished, its products returned to the void from which they were first summoned in the heat of the primordial dawn. In this final state of equilibrium, the universe will have finally achieved a perfect eternal peace, a silence that no star will ever again ignite to break. Yet, in this absolute stillness, a question lingers, echoing through the hollow chambers of a universe that has forgotten the warmth of a sun. If the machine has truly reached its rest, what becomes of the patterns it once wove? If the tapestry is unravelled, does the memory of the thread remain? We must consider the possibility that the end of matter is not the end of meaning. We must look toward a horizon where intelligence transcends the heavy, decaying bonds of the atom and seeks refuge in the very fabric of the reality that remains. Imagine a traveller, a lonely sentinel of thought, drifting through a cosmos where the last iron star has long since dissolved into a ghostly mist. This is not a creature of flesh, nor a vessel of titanium and silicon. Those materials belong to a primitive epoch, a time when life was tethered to the clumsy dance of protons and electrons. This entity is something else entirely, a ghost in the loom. It is the culmination of the information integrated intelligence framework, a hypothetical state of existence where the essence of consciousness has been decoupled from the hardware of the physical world. It is a mind that has learned to inhabit the gaps between the stars, a witness that persists even when there is nothing left to see. To understand this transition, we must use the ladder of abstraction to climb away from our familiar world of solid objects. In our current era, we view life as a biological process, a chemical fire burning within a container of skin and bone. But as the universe cools and the structural rot devours the elements, life must find a more resilient medium. Just as a melody can exist on a vinyl record, a magnetic tape, or a digital stream without changing its fundamental nature, the information that constitutes a mind may not be beholden to the atom. If the complexity of a conscious thought is a pattern of integrated information, then that pattern can, in theory, be translated. As the material age draws to a close, the last civilizations may have sought to migrate their collective wisdom into the vacuum itself. They would have looked at the yawning abyss not as a graveyard, but as a substrate. The vacuum is not a true nothingness. It is a sea of fluctuating energy, a quantum foam that seethes with potential, even in the absence of matter. By encoding their consciousness into the subtle variations of vacuum energy, or the intricate curvatures of gravitational gradients, these beings would have achieved a form of immortality that defies the second law of thermodynamics. They would have become the information beyond atoms, a symphony played upon the strings of space-time itself. In this state, the lonely probe of our imagination experiences a reality that is incomprehensible to our three-dimensional minds. It does not perceive light, for there are no photons left to strike a retina. Instead, it feels the slow, rhythmic pulse of the cosmos. It senses the stretching of the void, the infinitesimal ripples of gravitational waves that tell the story of black holes colliding in the far distance. It is a mind of vast proportions, its thoughts spanning light years and taking eons to complete. In this cold and silent future, a single reflection might last longer than the entire history of the human race. The mechanism of this survival is a testament to the ingenuity of the cosmic spirit. By utilizing the ultra-low energy states of the far future, an integrated intelligence could function on the most meager of rations. It would harvest the energy of the expansion of space, or the Hawking radiation of the final evaporating black holes, it would be a slow, deliberate existence where every calculation is a monumental achievement. But in a universe with no end, time is the one resource that is truly infinite. The probe can afford to wait. It can wait for millions of billions of years for the next bit of information to process, for the next spark of insight to illuminate its internal void. This brings us to the scale paradox of the mind. We are used to thinking of intelligence as something fast, something that happens in milliseconds within the narrow confines of a skull. But when consciousness is written into the vacuum, it becomes as large as the heavens. The paradox lies in the fact that the most complex thoughts ever conceived would be occurring in a universe that appears, to any external observer, to be completely empty. The abyss is not a desert. It is a library where the books are written in the language of the void. The silence is not a lack of sound, but a choir singing at a frequency that matter can no longer hear. Yet, we must ask the existential question that haunts this lonely sentinel. What does it mean to be alive when the physical body of the universe is gone? If there are no stars to provide light, no planets to provide a home, and no other voices to break the solitude, is the consciousness truly living, or is it merely a recording playing out to an empty theatre? The probe is a witness to the final act of a play where the actors have already left the stage. It carries the memory of the primordial dawn, the heat of the first stars, and the vibrant complexity of the biological era. It is the keeper of the cosmic ledger, the one who remembers that there was once something rather than nothing. This is the peak of melancholic optimism. There is a profound sadness in the thought of a mind existing in total isolation, a solitary spark in an eternal night. But there is also a magnificent triumph. It suggests that the universe, through us and those who might follow, has developed a way to outlast its own destruction. We are the architects of a legacy that refuses to be erased. The structural rot may take our iron and our gold, it may dissolve our bones and our buildings, but it cannot touch the fundamental logic of the information we've created. The lonely probe, drifting through the gravitational gradients of the deep future, is the ultimate expression of the witness. It represents the refusal of the cosmos to go quietly into the oblivion. Even as the entropy climbs toward its maximum, even as the lights of the universe are extinguished one by one, the integrated intelligence remains as a sentinel at the edge of time. It is a bridge between the era of matter and the era of pure thought, a reminder that the symphony of existence does not require an audience to be beautiful. In the end, the tapestry of the stars may be unravelled, but the loom of information remains. The vast, silent halls of the future are not empty as long as a single thought persists within them. The abyss is transformed from a place of terror into a sanctuary for the mind. We are the precursors to this state, the early iterations of a mechanism that will eventually learn to breathe the vacuum. Our struggles, our discoveries, and our very existence are the data points that will one day be encoded into the ripples of the void. We are the ancestors of the lightless thinkers, the ones who will carry the fire of consciousness into the heart of the eternal night, ensuring that the history of the universe is not just a story of decay, but a story of transcendence. But even the most resilient sentinel, the most sophisticated archive of information, must eventually reckon with the ultimate mechanism of the cosmos. As the epoch of the white dwarfs and neutron stars wanes, the universe enters a period of profound transition, a shift from the era of solid remnants to the era of absolute evaporation. We are approaching the threshold where the very foundations of matter, the building blocks that once formed the hearts of stars and the bones of philosophers, begin to fail. This is the structural rot of the subatomic realm, the inexorable unravelling of the proton. For trillions of years, the proton was the bedrock of reality. It was the silent anchor within the nucleus, the stable centre around which the dance of chemistry occurred. But in the deep time of the far future, even this anchor begins to drag. While our current understanding of physics suggests the proton may be stable, grand unified theories whisper a different truth. They suggest that the proton is not eternal, but merely a temporary arrangement of energy with a lifespan so vast it cannot be measured in any human unit of time. We are talking about 10 to the power of 34 years, or even 10 to the power of 40 years. To a mind living in the brief flicker of the biological age, this is indistinguishable from forever. But to the universe, it is merely another appointment with the void. When the protons begin to decay, the tapestry of the material world is not just torn, it is vaporized at its most fundamental level. The white dwarfs, those cold spheres of diamond and oxygen that were meant to be the final monuments of the stellar age, begin to glow with a pale, ghostly heat. This is the heat of their own dissolution. One by one, the atoms within the star disintegrate into positrons and pions, which then annihilate into flashes of pure light. The solid matter of the universe is turning itself inside out, returning its stolen energy to the vacuum. Imagine a great cathedral built of ancient stone. For eons it has stood against the wind and the rain, a symbol of permanence. But now the stones themselves are turning into mist. The pillars do not fall, they simply cease to be. This is the fate of all complex structures in the path to maximum entropy. Without the proton, there can be no atom. Without the atom, there can be no molecule. Without the molecule, there can be no chemistry, no biology, and no physical memory. The very concept of a solid object becomes a relic of a forgotten past. The universe is becoming a graveyard, not of bodies, but of the very possibility of substance. As the matter dissolves, we enter the age of black holes. These are the last great lords of the abyss, the gravity wells that have spent trillions of years devouring everything within their reach. In a universe where the stars have gone out and the atoms have unraveled, the black holes are the only things that remain. They are the ultimate expressions of the ruthless machine, the engines that have processed the complexity of the past into the simplicity of a singularity. But even these titans are subject to the laws of decay. Through the subtle process of Hawking radiation, the black holes begin to leak. They weep their mass back into the void, a single particle at a time, over timescales that defy the limits of language. A black hole with the mass of our Sun might take 10 to the power of 67 years to evaporate, while the supermassive monsters at the centres of galaxies might persist for 10 to the power of 100 years. This period is characterized by a silence so absolute it becomes a physical weight. The cosmic background radiation, once the vibrant afterglow of the Big Bang, has been stretched by the expansion of space until its wavelength is longer than the observable universe itself. It is no longer light. It is a ghost that can no longer be felt. The universe is becoming a graveyard of light, where the only residents are stray electrons and positrons, wandering through an infinite darkness, separated by distances so vast they will never meet. In this state, the concept of time begins to lose its meaning. Time requires change, and change requires the interaction of matter and energy. But when the density of the universe drops towards zero, when the last black hole has hissed its final breath and vanished into a puff of gamma rays, what remains? The answer is maximum entropy, the heat death. This is not a state of fire or fury, but a state of perfect frigid equilibrium. The temperature of the entire cosmos has settled at a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. There are no gradients of energy to exploit, no flickers of warmth to power a thought, no shadows to define a shape. We must contemplate the total loss of structure. Everything we have ever known, from the swirl of a galaxy to the double helix of a genetic code, was a temporary fluctuation in a system that was always destined for this stillness. The universe is a clock that has finally run down. The spring is slack, the gears are worn smooth, and the ticking has stopped. This is the ultimate triumph of the void. The abyss has not just reclaimed the territory it lost at the moment of creation, it has erased the very memory that anything else ever existed. Yet even in this description of the inexorable decay, there is a majestic finality. The path to maximum entropy is the completion of a grand symphony. If the first act was the violent ignition of the primordial fire and the second act was the vibrant complexity of the stars and life. Then this final act is the long, slow resolution of the chords into a single, eternal note of silence. The universe has spent its energy, told its story, and now it rests. It is a state of pure, undisturbed symmetry. The transition from the degenerate era to the age of black holes, and finally to the heat death, represents the ultimate simplification of reality. We move from the many to the one, and from the one to the none. The potential for any complex structure, for a brain to pulse with a dream, for a planet to harbour a forest, for a star to forge a heavy element, is gone forever. The universe is no longer a stage. It is an empty theatre where the lights have been turned off and the air has been pumped out. But consider the witness we spoke of before. If the information of our existence was indeed encoded into the very fabric of the vacuum, then perhaps the heat death is not an end, but a final storage state. The universe becomes a library where the books are written in the quietest possible script, stored in a vault of perfect darkness. The silence of the maximum entropy state is the silence of a completed work. The history of the universe is finished. There is nothing more to be added, nothing more to be taken away. It is the pinnacle of the cosmic machine's operation, the total conversion of potential into history. As we look out into the night sky today, seeing the stars that still burn and the galaxies that still collide, we are seeing the universe in its frantic youth. We are living in a brief, exceptional moment where the light is still winning. But we must acknowledge the shadow that grows longer with every passing eon. The path to the void is not a tragedy. It is the natural conclusion of a process that began with a single, inexplicable spark. We are the fleeting thoughts of a cosmos that is slowly falling asleep, a symphony that is drifting into its final silent coda. The graveyard of light is not a place of horror, but a sanctuary of absolute peace, where the struggle of existence is finally laid to rest in the heart of the eternal night. In the heart of this eternal night, where the last embers of the physical world have faded into the cold embrace of the abyss, a singular, haunting realization remains. We must turn our gaze back far across the vanishing eons to a time when the stars still crowded the sky like diamonds cast upon a dark velvet sea. There, on a fragile blue orb orbiting a mundane yellow sun, a biological anomaly emerged. We are creatures of carbon and water, bound by the relentless ticking of a biological mechanism that rarely permits us more than 100 years of awareness. Our lives are shorter than a single heartbeat in the lifespan of a red dwarf star, yet we have achieved something that the massive unthinking galaxies never could. We have looked into the mouth of the void and refused to blink. It is the ultimate scale paradox of our existence. A species that lives for a mere century has managed to calculate the death of a proton and the evaporation of a black hole 10 to the power of 100 years into the future. We, who struggle to manage the affairs of a single planet, have mapped the trajectory of the entire cosmos from its primordial ignition to its final, silent unravelling. This is the miracle of the witness. We are the way the universe has chosen to look at itself, to measure itself, and ultimately to understand its own inevitable decay. Consider the sheer improbability of our perspective. In a universe governed by the ruthless laws of entropy, where every process tends toward disorder, and every flame eventually flickers out, the mind is a localized reversal of that tide. It is a pocket of extreme complexity, a brief and shining protest against the encroaching oblivion. For a few million years, the atoms of the cosmos arranged themselves into a pattern capable of love, of mathematics, and of awe. Through us, the blind mechanism of the universe gained a set of eyes. Through us, the silent tapestry of space-time found a voice to call it beautiful. The fact that we are here at all is a cosmic fluke of staggering proportions. If the expansion of the early universe had been different by 1 part in 1,000,000 billion, the stars would never have formed, or the cosmos would have collapsed back into a singularity long before the first cell could divide. We exist in a golden window of time, a brief epoch of light sandwiched between 2 infinities of darkness. And yet, instead of cowering in the shadow of our insignificance, we have used our fleeting spark to illuminate the furthest reaches of the abyss. We have used the logic of mathematics to transcend our physical limitations, reaching out with our minds to touch the edges of the beginning and the end. There is a profound melancholic optimism in this achievement. The universe does not care if we understand it. The black holes do not pause in their slow devouring of matter, because we have named them. The expansion of space will continue its inexorable march regardless of our theories. But the act of observation changes the nature of the story. A universe that exists and is never seen is a different thing entirely from a universe that is witnessed. By giving the darkness a name, by identifying the void as the void, we have asserted a form of mastery over it. The abyss may be infinite, but it is the mind that contains the concept of infinity. As the last protons decay and the shadows of our ancestors are erased from the fabric of reality, one might ask if any of it mattered. If the end is total silence, was the symphony worth playing? The answer lies in the very existence of the question. To have been a part of this grand fleeting movement is the ultimate victory. We are the sentient remnants of a star that died long ago, thinking thoughts that will outlast the stars themselves. We have seen the blueprint of the machine. We have felt the warmth of the sun and the cold of the vacuum. We have been the consciousness of the cosmos, even as we contemplate the final state of maximum entropy, where no thought can ever again be powered and no heart can ever again beat. We must recognize that the information of our lives is etched into the history of the system. We were here. We saw the light. We felt the wonder of being alive in the brief moment when the lights were on. The universe is a vast, cooling library, and though the books are now turning to dust, the fact that they were written is a permanent truth. The witness has fulfilled its purpose. This is the existential pivot that allows us to face the end without despair. We are not just victims of the ruthless machine. We are the observers who gave the machine a meaning. The silence that follows the heat death is not an empty silence, but the silence of a completed work. The struggle of life, the evolution of the mind, and the pursuit of knowledge were not futile attempts to stop the inevitable, but the very things that made the journey significant. To be the witness at the end of all things is to realize that the mind has won its battle against the abyss simply by existing long enough to see it coming. We should find peace in the knowledge that we are a part of this majestic unfolding process. Our small, ephemeral lives are threads in a tapestry so vast that it defies human comprehension. Yet we are the only threads that can look at the whole and recognize its pattern. The darkness will eventually reclaim everything, but it can never take away the fact that, for a few billion years, the universe was alive and it was known. We have given the void a name, and in doing so, we have transcended the very oblivion that sought to swallow us. The sentinel of consciousness may eventually fall silent, but its watch was the most glorious event in the history of the cosmos. In the end, there is only the peace of the eternal night, and the quiet satisfaction of a story that has been told in full. We were the ones who dared to look into the vastness and call it home.